It's been a really interesting year for wood in British Columbia and actually around the world. There's amazing things going on. We've got demonstration projects all over the province. We've got people getting really creative. And if you look around the world now, we've got 8, 9, 10-story buildings. This thing just got finished last week in Hanover. It's 100 meters tall. It's going to hold a turbine. We're really doing amazing things with it. And not any better time to have a presenter like today, like Jeff McLellan today. Jeff is the Vice President of BFL Canada Insurance Services. He's one of a handful of insurance brokers specializing in liability insurance specifically for architects and engineers. He possesses extensive knowledge and expertise in the area, having worked specifically just with architect and engineering liability insurance for 15 years. And he's developed strong relationships with the whole design community and various professionals, and he's one of the top brokers in his field. So it's very important for him to be here at this time when we're trying all these wonderful things and looking forward to a fantastic 2013 for amazing new projects in wood. So I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you. So really quick, apologies for the little bit of a technical hiccup this morning. I've been working from home for a month because my wife's on bed rest with number 2. So I got into the office at 6 o'clock this morning figuring I have lots of time, and they changed our Wi-Fi password. And could I get hold of an IT guy? No, because he was up playing Warcraft all night. So I do apologize. There's nothing earth-shattering in the slides, but I will make sure that the presentation does get through to Suk and the folks at Woodwork so that they can put it on their website. So I'd like to thank Suk and Woodworks BC for the opportunity to participate in this event today. And first things first, even though it's early, I would like to thank you already for your attention. On Saturday night, I was the MC at my 20th high school reunion, and it was a room of about 120 people. It took me threatening to take off my clothes and actually taking them off to get people to pay attention. So unfortunately, there are some photos on Facebook that will probably haunt me at all future reunions. So myself, I joined BFL back in 2005 when I moved back from England, and I'm a shareholder there in the Vancouver office, and also am national with responsibilities for Western Canada. So when I was first asked if I was be willing to speak today, I thought that the organizers would be providing me with a topic that they felt would be of interest to you. That's usually what happens. I just show up and talk for 45 minutes. Which is something I've done previously, and I didn't figure it would be a big deal. However, I soon realized 2 things. First one was that I had to come up with my own topic, which wasn't the end of the world. I knew I could do that, and I reviewed past presentations and noted that some previous presenters had 110 slide PowerPoints, which I knew was not something I could actually accomplish in 45 minutes. So I came up with 2 topics, which I generally have found myself discussing with clients in recent years. They are emerging technologies and the use and introduction of new materials into projects. When referring to emerging technologies today, I'll be touching on 2 distinct areas, the first being new technology in the design process, and the second being construction methodology. If I wanted to, I could not stand up here for my entire time and ramble off statistics and words of caution from the many insurance companies who I work with about how they are concerned with these 2 topics. The reason being that I did discuss both these topics with 6 different insurers, and simply put, none of them have any real concerns about these areas. That might be confusing to some of you, but simply put, they recognize that you are the ones pushing the design of your projects in new directions, and that you will be taking, or assuming that you will be taking, all the necessary steps you need to ensure that you are always striving to do so in the best interest of your project, your client, and the general public. I am a firm believer that the insurance industry should never try to influence or control the design of a project. An example of what I mean by this was back in 1998, where an insurance company decided, in view of the leaky condo debacle out here in British Columbia, that they wanted to add an endorsement to their policy wherein it required rain screen systems on all projects. Unfortunately, variations of that original endorsement still stand today. I do not believe that any underwriter who I've ever worked with has the proper education or expertise to prescribe or influence the design of your projects. You are the professionals. The first thing I'll be talking about briefly today is building information modeling. I'm pretty sure that most of you in the room are familiar with this, even if you've not worked with it yet. From all accounts, BIM software is by far one of the most significant tools that has influenced changes in the design process, including recently the growing trend towards integrated project development, design process as a project delivery method. I'm not going to speak about IDP today, but I thought I'd mention it just so you couldn't ask me questions later. If you're looking to use BIM on an upcoming project, I believe the most important questions you need to ask yourself are, is BIM required? Typically, BIM is best suited for complex projects where there are significant services, or the project team, the consultant, contractor, and owner will benefit from its use, for example, in optimizing different solutions for problems. The second, and likely most important question from a risk standpoint is, are you and your staff familiar enough with the software to effectively use it? As noted on this slide, BIM is not simply CAD on steroids. So now let's quickly go over some of the benefits of BIM. I was going to insert a slide about some of the specific risks of using BIM, but you can simply refer back to the points that I'm going to be mentioning, as each of these benefits has its own potential issues. An example of these issues, sorry, I'll actually go over the slide because you can't see it. So benefits of BIM: single data entry with multiple uses. That includes 3D modeling, consistent design bases, takeoffs, estimating, shop drawings, fabrication, conflict identification and resolution, visualization of alternative solutions, energy optimization, constructability reviews including 4D simulations, reduced fabrication cost and errors, and facilities management. An example of potential issues is takeoffs. Recently, an architect client of mine contacted me saying that a client of his had asked him to provide him with this additional service. Although it was not clear that he would receive any significant additional fees for doing the work, but would likely be best left to the contractor, who would be relying on the information when bidding the project. While I'll admit it is likely an additional service that many design firms will provide at some point in the future, my current opinion is that it should only be done with contractual limitations and indemnity agreements in place to protect the firm in the event that there is a mistake in the information at the time, or that the model is updated at a later date and revised figures are not provided through to the contractor. To truly get the benefits of BIM can offer, you must always remember that BIM is only as good as the expertise of the team members and quality of information placed in the model. Keep in mind that when you use BIM, the use of BIM is still emerging, and just because the last electrical engineer you work with has a lot of experience working with it, doesn't necessarily mean that the electrical engineer you're working with on this project does. That extends beyond the firm to the individuals involved. As a practitioner or a firm, you do need to discuss how you plan to use BIM. There's certainly the opinion out there that it could increase your liability, and therefore your fees should reflect this. A particular area of concern is that if you are assuming the role of model manager, you need to understand what this means and have systems and procedures in place to ensure that you are consistent in what and how you are providing this service on your projects. So what are some of the risks I'm referring to when I'm talking about BIM and the use of BIM on projects? Here are a few areas where I believe we could see claims coming in the future. From owners for any errors in space or cost estimates, both for construction and ongoing operation of the building, keeping in mind that the BIM model in a perfect environment is to survive the life of the building and be used for maintenance and ongoing purposes. From contractors for coordination delays and issues, conflict resolution. By this I mean where someone has not caught the conflict during the checks. Again, the software is only as good as its users. And for project schedules, again, where the constructability is flawed or delayed as a result of errors in the actual model. As with any project, communication and documentation is crucial. Without agreed procedures in place, you're exposing your firm to potential additional liabilities. It is also very important that everyone involved with the project discuss and understand how the models will be used. Here are some other key questions that need to be discussed at the start of the project. Who will own the model? The owner, consultant, or the consultants collectively? How will the model be specified? How will the model be administered or managed? Collectively, the consultant team should discuss and agree upon procedures that will help ensure that all of the information in the model is complete, accurate, and up to date. Without this, you will find yourselves in a very difficult spot in the event of a problem or a claim on the project. The overall topic of BIM has been a half-day or a full-day seminar that I've seen and attended. Therefore, before moving on, I just want to take this opportunity to say that I feel the benefits can easily outweigh the risks. You just need to be informed and educated as your firm moves towards the use of BIM in your projects. Okay, so the next topic I wanted to discuss with you from a technological standpoint relates to some of the evolutions in construction methodology. The two I'm going to talk about today are modular prefabricated construction and cross-laminated timber panels. Whilst I recognize that CLT panels are a material and not necessarily viewed as a construction method, their use on projects certainly delivers new benefits and challenges for contractors and consultants. Seeing as most of you are likely familiar with modular construction, I'll point out benefits by simply saying, and in my opinion, there is very limited risk to the consultant associated with modular construction. The quality control, construction speed, energy efficient structures, stronger, more durable structures, less waste, neighborhood friendly, reduced construction traffic, and noise at the site are all benefits that definitely should be kept in mind when thinking of this or prescribing this to an owner on a project. Whilst living in the UK, I visited construction sites where I saw factory-built kitchen and bathroom units that arrived on site, ready to be lifted by crane, put in position, and hooked up to the building. This type of work obviously has benefits, and as long as the proper testing and checking is done at the factory and prior to units being installed, it can certainly speed up the construction process to the benefits of your owner clients. With respect to CLT panels, on my last trip to the UK, I had the opportunity to visit two significant CLT projects. From my discussions with the project architect on site, it was clear that although the panel technology had been around for about 20 years and used on many projects, there is still a steep learning curve for the project participants. This includes coordination and finishing issues that arose. One of the most interesting ones was on the first project that they did, which was about a 9,000 square meters school project. The contractor didn't even realize that the company providing the panels would in fact be showing up with a crew to erect them themselves. So they basically had over budgeted on the workforce side, and these guys just stood around and watched these. I think it took 10 guys 19 days to erect the full building. Unfortunately, the contractor didn't believe the panel company when they said how quickly it would go up, so they had no windows or doors to actually install. So some of the panels were exposed to the elements to a certain degree, and they had to kind of come up with quick solutions on site to try to deal with that. The most impressive thing that I did learn about CLT from visiting these two projects was, like I said, the potential time savings can be very, very, very significant. So I think the technology is definitely going to catch on over here, particularly now that more plants are in place. But North American contractors, generally speaking, and the consultants will find themselves in a learning curve situation working with this product. From a liability standpoint, again, generally speaking, the insurers I spoke with had no real concerns from a professional liability standpoint for the use of CLT in projects, whether it would be a portion, hybrid type project, or in its entirety. The reason I think they feel this is they look at you as trusted professionals that are educated and experienced in what you do, and they believe that obviously if you're not familiar with the product and have no experience working with it at all, you should proceed cautiously to begin with, and also look for an experienced partner who can potentially help you with the project. So, the bigger issue with CLT, and this was one of my first questions when I came back. I was speaking with Suk Johal, and he asked me what I thought of what I saw, and I said it was amazing. I said I was very impressed with the buildings, and my question, being an insurance guy, was how does it burn? That was my question. You hear charring, you hear all these issues or these benefits or relating to it as opposed to a stick build. And we actually were invited to a burn test at Carleton University, and our risk engineer went, and he came back, and some of the video footage that I watched was pretty mind-blowing insofar as how the panels actually performed. But the issue comes in its name, CLT, timber. A lot of insurance companies are bound by reinsurance treaties that if a project is over a certain percentage wood, they have to treat it as a wood project. There's no kind of variances within their rating models that allow them to say, but it's not, 2x4. So it's going to be an education process. Like I say here, most North American insurance companies that we work with that do offer course of construction and completed building property insurance aren't familiar with the type of building material. Speaking to the folks in the UK, they did struggle on their first project arranging the course of construction insurance just simply because of the scale of the CLT project. That first school, 9,000 square meters, was 100% wood. There was a little bit of brick cladding on the outside, just from an aesthetic standpoint to prevent vandalism, but that was it. So, in our climate, what can we expect as this technology and this construction method moves forward is that both underwriters and home warranty providers on residential projects will likely have questions, and they're going to need your help as the consultants to help them understand your project. A simple example is I insured a very large single-family home in British Columbia. The quote that I got for the course of construction insurance was 1/3 of what the other broker had gotten. I knew the architect. It was a client of mine. I got permission of the client to talk to the architect, and the other broker had gone to market saying it was a wood building. It was the furthest thing from a wood building as far as I was concerned. It was blasted into rock. There was glulam beams and trusses, and that was basically the extent of the wood. It was all glazing overlooking Lake Okanagan. So, there again is a broker who you think is supposed to look after everyone's best interest that, simply put, didn't ask the right questions. The clients, your clients that come to people like me to arrange construction insurance are expecting me to ask all the questions I need to get them the right coverage and the right premium. So, you'll probably find yourselves, if you're getting involved in CLT projects, having to spend a little bit of more time educating people that you probably think you don't really need to. It's not your responsibility, but I think if you're the one kind of helping push that into the marketplace, you're probably the best person to help someone like me or others understand. So carrying on with where is risk in CLT panels, from my visit in the UK, I felt there's two things I wanted to make you aware of that I think you need to discuss with your client. The first one is future-proofing your project. Just understand how the project might have changing requirements in the future, and can you integrate those into the initial design? Everything from conduits, cable pulls, etc. These school projects, what blew my mind with one of them was the entire floor plate is modular. There's all these walls that are just partition walls that they could easily open up and double the size of lecture spaces, double the size of classrooms, overnight if they really wanted to. So future-proofing your project is probably something, it's a discussion worth having. It can save you some hassle down the road. We're all pleased to see that the limitation period, ultimate limitation in BC is going to be dropping down, hopefully to 15 in the next little while here. But that being said, that's still 15 years. And I don't know many people that 15 years into a building have no plans on changing, updating, or modifying the building itself. And then the second one is maintenance requirements and recommendations. I mean, obviously, if you've got for example, a school district or health group, seniors housing, anything like that, where they have typically had stick build or concrete, masonry projects, they might not understand what needs to be done to keep this building going the way it is. So I feel it's your role as the professional prescribing the technology and the material to at least help them understand what needs to be done moving forward. So, this is kind of the end of my little CLT bit on technology, which is, don't underestimate the power of information. This is a photo I took And the first stairwell that I went down from the 3rd floor in this building to the lower level, and having grown up in, spent most of my time in North America, and you watch construction sites, you got the firewall, you've got the concrete stairwell, you've got the concrete elevator shaft. To kind of exit the building down these completely wooden stairs, for me, was a bit of a mind shift. It was a very warm material. From an energy efficiency standpoint, it's got to be a million times better than the school next door that they were about to demolish. So, information is going to be key for this as a kind of construction method as well as material. So now shifting really quickly to new materials and where's the risk. Well, the answer for consultants is simple. It's everywhere. The most important question you do need to ask yourself, however, is how do you manage the risk? And can you manage it? So consultants typically do enjoy focusing on design. This is clear from my 15 years working with architects. So that's what you're trained to do, and that's what you're engaged to do. That's what your client pays you to do. But the unfortunate reality is that sometimes on projects, issues arise, disputes arise that could turn into claims. And if you haven't had the unfortunate, or I actually think fortunate experience of having a claim because it helps you understand the process better, they can be very, very time consuming and very draining on a firm. And in some instances can cause a lot of friction even within the firm between staff and partners. It impacts morale. It could impact the firm's reputation. I get calls many times from clients saying, what do I do? And I've heard everything from stuff that makes you think of the Three Little Pigs, a straw bale house. It was probably one of the more interesting phone calls I've ever had because it kind of caught me off guard, to be honest. I didn't realize that from a technology standpoint, anyone was really pursuing that in British Columbia. But the unfortunate reality for you as professionals is that anyone can make the claim against you. There's just two things that they need. The first is that they want to pursue you and blame you. The second is that they find a lawyer who's willing to work with them. You can imagine that B is not hard, particularly in our province. So if there's one thing that you actually take away from my talk today, this is the slide that I want it to be. And that is that if you invest the time and energy at the start of a project to understand, first of all, the potential sources of claims and the potential claimants and who they are, and then work with your lawyer to explore options to either limit or eliminate those from arising, you'll be in a much better place and it'll have much less of an impact on you and your firm. So now we get to specifying materials. So, new materials, where is the risk? The important thing when you're specifying materials that you just need to keep in mind is, are you informed? That's a very important thing, particularly when we're talking about engineered wood and new products that are newer products coming into our marketplace. Are you informed? Can you actually sit there and say, yes, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've done all the research. I know what I'm prescribing in my project. And the reason you need to be informed is that the more specific your recommendation is, the greater your liability is, right? So if you specify, for example, an actual window unit as opposed to a type of window unit, a specific manufacturer, specific details to go along with it, and there is a problem with that in the future, you're one of the only people left standing other than the contractor who may or may not actually be around to deal with that problem. So another thing that's important when you're thinking about materials and new materials is that what's good today isn't always good tomorrow. There's a couple examples up there of things that were great at the time when they first kind of came out. And as time went by, society and individuals realized that they weren't necessarily in everyone's best interest. So the last point when it comes to specifying materials that I wanted to share with you is one that many lawyers have kind of ingrained upon me over the years, just to try to, I guess, one more reminder to my clients. And that is when it comes to the standard of care. The standard of care that's been kind of, you guys are held to as consultants is simply that. You're expected to have personal experience or knowledge of the materials you're specifying. You know, you may think it's difficult for new emerging stuff for that to be the case, but that's the kind of the standard that you will be held to if it turns into a claim, like a legal situation. So my new materials, I mean, I've just kind of listed a couple here that are kind of things that you're seeing, you know, hot topics. You see them in magazines. They look sexy. They sound good. And you know, some of them are great. I'm not saying they aren't. The question is, if you're specifying them or trying to incorporate them into your project, do you have that familiarity with them, or have you done the due diligence and research to comfortably say, I looked at alternatives, and this is what I think is actually best suited for this project? So my next slide is one that it's probably my favorite slide, and it's unfortunately a result of numerous claims that I've had over my career, and that's the statement that it's what the client wanted. You'll see there's an asterisk, and that's because, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure from my experience it's not going to help you in the event of a claim. You can't hide behind the fact that, you know, the client on a project was the driving force behind something. That kind of area of law is emerging with BIM and with integrated design process. But it is still emerging as far as that blurring of lines between who's designing what and who's specifying what. So as it stands right now, I don't think you can hide behind the fact that, you know, if you went out and you did a building that had a massive green roof, it's what the client wanted. So if there's problems, it's the client's problem. You know, you're the professional that's been engaged. You're the one that's expected to have the experience and technical knowledge and education that enables the project to kind of have that green roof and have it kind of come out working for you or for the project. Is this the right time? 9:10? Okay. So, you know, essentially, part of what I really wanted to kind of get through to you as a group today, and why I took the opportunity to participate, is that I think that we are at a point where there's a lot of changes happening in your world. That's from information, software, design process, materials. You know, it's kind of coming at you from every single angle. And what's happening in today's world, I think, with kind of technology and social media and the ability to share things, is that things are catching on a lot quicker, or appear to be catching on a lot quicker than they used to as far as changes. You know, you get a magazine, you know, it used to be you'd get a magazine once a month. And you might have time to flip through it, and you might see something, and you're like, oh, that's interesting, and then kind of do a little bit of research into a new material or a new product. It's kind of go, you know, I think I might want to include that in one of my projects. And where it's changed today is you've got, you know, forums on LinkedIn where people are just throwing stuff left, right, and center and recommending stuff. Like, I've seen stuff on LinkedIn that I just would never put on there if it was me as a professional, because that's out there. That's in the public realm now. So your statement, whilst you think you were just sounding off on the benefits of something or the negative impact of something, if you rip CLT today about the future-proofing issue, and then you're designing a project in 6 months and something goes wrong in 2 years, and the client goes, well, geez, you've got to spend all this money, you know, if they haven't left the wood exposed, you know, redoing all this, you know, gyprock work or whatever, and, you know, it's cost us 120 grand to retrofit and run some cables that you really should have included. If you made a statement, you know, 2 years before that online saying that same issue, you're toast. Like, there's no way out of that saying, well, my opinion changed. You know, you'd have a hard time, I think, sitting in any mediation, because none of this stuff will ever get to court for the most part. But you'd have a really hard time in a mediation saying, well, I didn't mean that, or, well, new information came to light. You know, once you make a statement in today's world, it's out there, and it's very difficult to kind of get that back. You know, I truly believe, you know, this is, you know, Woodworks has put this on. If you haven't really looked into CLT and you've kind of heard it or you've read the odd article, there's a lot of information online, and I highly recommend looking into it. It is without a doubt going to be part of your future. Having been in two of these buildings, I've never been in a school that felt like that. I know that's kind of maybe a weird statement to make, but I've got friends that are teachers in my old high school, and when I go to meet them for lunch, I go, dear God, we went here. Like, it's been updated, but it's still awful. And these schools were just unique experiences for me because they're actually in session. So, you know, lunch break comes and 600 kids come out, and I'm expecting it to be this cavernous kind of gymnasium with sound bouncing everywhere because all this wood. And the acoustic engineers or the acoustic guys that were involved, the baffles they put in place basically neutralized the sound completely. It was almost not really that much louder with the kids out of classes when they were in class. You know, taking designed kind of steps and measures in different directions. You know, one of these schools was in a really bad neighborhood. Well, maybe not neighborhood, area, I guess is the right term to use. And so that's why they got the funding to put this school in place. They'd had massive amounts of bullying incidents, including like police being called probably once every couple of weeks. Since the school had opened, it had been open over a year and a half, they had no bullying incidents. From a design standpoint, there was no corridors. There was no hallways that you could chase someone down and pound them for their lunch money or whatever. The bathrooms were open, like it was a unisex open bathroom concept where you had a toilet room and then a common island of sinks right across the hall from the staff room where there was, you know, CCTV footage. And what the headmaster did was basically for the real big problem kids, he actually took them into the CCTV control room and said, look, there's 18 monitors. It's all being recorded. You're not getting away with it. And it just changed. I expected, when I saw the neighborhood I was driving through and the old school, I have to be honest, I fully expected to walk in and see kind of, you know, vandalism in the stairwells and, you know, someone, you know, JM plus, you know, KM or whatever. There was nothing. There was no vandalism. There's no damage. It was almost like these kids had a newfound respect for their environment. And that comes down, I believe, to the architects involved and the material selection and the efforts that went into the design, you know. They had user group meetings with parents and the local community to figure out, you know, what do we want it to look like. And it really was, I mean, I remember my old band room, for example, where, you know, you couldn't really practice because there's, you know, 6 other people there trying to play the same instruments, playing different songs. And these had individual music kind of soundproof rooms where these kids could go for their music lessons. So it was very unique to see. And if you ever get the chance and you're in the UK, these architects and engineers love talking about this stuff, and you know, I'd highly recommend that you try to get in touch with someone and possibly, you know, see what they have to say. So that's kind of the end of my formal presentation.
Multi-story buildings, and in order to do that, we have to go and get equivalence measures on the code, and of course. We're studying, like getting informed, and we're following the path that you described to make sure the liability of every professional is covered. But it's actually the regulation authority that has to approve the demonstration of the equivalence to the code for mainly fire issues. And what is their liability in other than, you know, ensuring the correct procedure and correct methodology of proof? And if there's a claim that comes around and that, you know, methodology proves out to be wrong for some reason that we cannot predict, how would it be seen in a case where you would have to go, you know, before a judge into mediation, and what's their involvement? Where would they be liable?
The approving authority?
Yeah.
I think they'd kind of do this. That's what they would try to do. They would try to say, hey, we just took your information, the information your consultants put forward, we evaluated it, you were pushing us to agree to this. We felt, based on the information you provided, that it was adequate and it was a good equivalent, and so we approved it. So the responsibility really in their mind would be resting on the consultants that were involved more than anything. I don't think you would struggle to see the approving authority held in that by anyone. You know, they might be invited to the table, but they're going to sit there on their hands the entire time saying, everyone else get out your checkbooks. I mean, the one thing you have to keep in mind if we're talking about a fire, a problem with a building, with a CLT building, is right now as it stands, any building in Vancouver out of any materials could have a big massive fire. It's insured. That insurance company just deals with it. And then what that insurance company does is they actually pay people whose job it is, both internally and externally, to find that money, to get that money back. You know, if you live, your house, for example, if your house, the insured value of your house is $400,000, I mean, you probably pay $1,400 a year, $1,500 a year, you know, whatever, $2,000 for your house insurance. It takes a lot of $2,000 to pay for replacement of your house if it was to burn to the ground. Insurance companies aren't in the business when it comes to the property side of just cutting checks. They'll cut a check, that's their job. That was their part of the contract, but they also take over your recovery rights to go back on other parties, and trust me, they do in a very significant way. Unfortunately, I've got one right now where it took me 15 lawyers to find a lawyer for my client because he was the last guy invited to the dance. And I'm just in shock that this claim's still dragging on, but apparently they want this much, and all the insurance companies are down here. There's just this massive void in between. So,
just a complimentary. We've looked into code change here in BC and discussed the fire issues and the claims that could come out of the fire issues, and how do you analyze it as a professional? And actually, you get data and models for fire propagations and smoke, but the actual analysis is a risk analysis done by the conceptor, the designer. And is that risk analysis, how do you approach that? It's like nut numbers, it's not a model, it's simply based on a risk analysis.
Are you talking the code changes here going to 6-story stick build?
Yes.
Okay, I've placed insurance on 3 6-story stick build buildings, and our office has done probably one of the larger ones out there right now. And the interesting thing for us as people that, we've seen wood frame rates for stick build go from 5 cents up to 15 cents after a couple of those big fires in Alberta. Well, we're right back down, and we're seeing a bit of hardening. But the first building I did, we told the developer, we're at like 5.5 cents right now. We don't know how this is really going to be viewed for budgeting purposes. You know what? Put 7 in there, and I did it for 4.5 cents. So it's market driven. From a risk standpoint, people talk about the Remy fire, and people have concerns about that. I think that was kind of unfortunately kind of a bit of a perfect storm. I personally, if I was a developer, I know that security is expensive. I wouldn't rely just on one system if I was going 6 stories, simply because, yes, you pay for insurance. Yes, the insurance is there to basically rebuild the project to the stage it was at. But we all know that, particularly for market housing, the delays and hassles associated with having a claim are unmeasurable. So I'd invest the money up front as a developer and say, you know what, if you want to use Sonatrol or video, fine, but I also would have site security walking by, and make sure my site is properly fenced and all that stuff, simply because having a fire is never fun. We've had a lot of we've had quite a few fires over the years with our developer clients, and it's just delays that could be avoided in most instances.
Hello, my name is Adnan. I wonder, as an insurer, have you come across any cases or issues with the mold and indoor air quality in connection with new materials?
Not specifically with new materials. I mean, generally speaking, the mold issue everyone thought was going to follow the leaky buildings, right? What effectively happened in the insurance industry, keep in mind I'm a broker, so I work with companies, but what insurance companies are really good at doing is if there's a problem and they can get out in front of it, they typically do. So if you look at almost every general liability insurance policy now has a mold exclusion. We're starting to see some policies with kind of sublimits or buybacks, but it's usually not a significant amount, or it's just for cleanup. It excludes bodily injury issues. So we haven't heard or seen any kind of specific things relating to new materials. The one thing I can say from my research on CLT and seeing these schools is these things they're like airtight buildings to a certain extent, and so you would certainly not have the migration issue in a CLT building that you would have in a stick-built 2x4 building, as far as the ability for mold, if there was the presence of mold, to get from one space to another.
Matthew Cody, Jeff.
Hello, Matthew.
Can you elaborate on the current state of the 15-year ultimate liability, when it's liable to be passed? Is it retroactive? And how will it change your servicing the industry?
Thanks, Matthew. My understanding of how the Act is structured is it's had its third reading. It just needs kind of approval. Obviously, with Ms. Clark deciding, you know what, there's no point sitting. If we're going to have an election, we might as well just enjoy ourselves. Not getting political here. I'm just saying that's how I read it as a taxpayer. You kind of sit there and say, okay, so that's stalled, obviously waiting for that. I think someone actually said to me, one of the lawyers said it's just waiting for royal consent, but I think that has to take place during the sitting. It won't be retroactive, which sucks. There's no other way to put it. But the reality is the reason for that is that going from 30 down to 15 is still a big improvement for your industry. And it's probably a kind of, it's probably the point, it's the point that they got to, was 15 years. You know, I think there's some people pushing for 10, some people pushing for 12, but they got to 15, and so you kind of take what you can now. So it will be for new services, for claims arising out of new services being provided. And the reason they've done that is if I engaged you 20 years ago to work, you know, not that any of your clients actually look into that issue at the outset, but the argument would be you can't retroactively change someone's rights. So that's what I think and we all know the lawyers that are behind pushing that argument is the plaintiff's counsel, right? You know, the guys that are suing consultants, they obviously want, well, she's 25 years old. I mean, I got stuff 30 years in like 6 months. And like you see people trying to argue, well, the actual detail doesn't, you know, and 30 years isn't, it's just a drop dead date. So unfortunately, my understanding is that it's not retroactive. It's going to be for new stuff going forward. The insurance industry, generally speaking, is happy to see that. If you look at the experience of change limitation periods on a kind of international basis, anyone that's worked in California, you'll know how it works down there. Basically 9 years, 9 months into a project, you'll get a letter basically telling you about the claim that might be coming down the pipeline. They don't know what's wrong, but they're telling you about it to preserve coverage under their 10-year limitation. Alberta didn't have the similar thing when they switched. So I'm hoping that we won't take the U.S. route. You know, I initially had big concerns when the home warranty programs got back online, figuring that there's just going to be all these just before the cutoff. And whilst prudent strata corporations are undertaking reviews, we're not seeing this onslaught of new claims just under the wire. So maybe, you know, level heads will prevail and people will say, hey, if we don't have a problem, we don't have a problem. But yeah, so 15 years is certainly better than 30, and insurers are kind of happy to see that. You know, the reality is that the kind of the most likely time period for any claim is basically from substantial completion to 2 years out. Once the building's put to its end use with the occupants in there, you know, that's where you start finding out that, hey, the heating's really hot in the summer and the winter's really cold, and you know, it's not working. You know, this isn't working for us. That's not working for us. We don't like those tiles. Actually, sorry, they don't work. You know, so yeah. So that's hopefully answers your question.
Okay, I've got a few things to say before you leave to your next sessions. But first of all, I'd like to thank Jeff for an excellent presentation. It said that if you have not had a chance to see CLT in BC, please take the opportunity. Go to the Earth Sciences Building. Go see the Bioenergy Research Building. Go to Elkford if you have to, see the Community Center. We've got about a dozen projects like that and more coming down the line. This is here. This is real. The only thing I noticed from Jeff's presentation is we're not going to call it cross-laminated timber anymore. We're going to start calling it organic concrete. Thanks so much.